Hello students, today I will cover Unit 3. It's related to XML. XML is one of the vast subject in web programming field. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. So these are the syllabus content for your subject as Unit 3. World Web Consortium started developing XML in 1996 and the first draft is published in February 1998. The main reason for development of XML was the many deficiencies of HTML. HTML, that is Hypertext Markup Language, is a language that is meant to describe the layout of general information as well as provide some guidance to how it should be displayed. So that means the main objective of HTML is presentation. So HTML describes the layout and how it should be displayed. So for example, in XML there are bold, italics, underline, and also we can add some meta information such as audio, video, images, etc. Whereas XML is a meta markup language that provides a framework to create our own markup languages. So it provides a simple and universal way to store any textual data. It is very important. XML is used to store textual data, and any data stored in XML format can be shared between any type of applications. So here it can be electronically distributed. So storing of information, every software has its own type of file storage structure. For example, database software such as MySQL has its own format of storing the information. SQL Server has its own proprietary format. Similarly, word processing software, spreadsheet softwares all are having their own storage structure. To share the information between these different type of application that running in different platforms, we need one common platform method such that all application can understand it, they can generate the information in that way, and they can send it to other applications. For that reason XML is defined. But very important point, XML itself is not a language, it is a meta markup language. So using this we can create our own languages. So that means here is XML itself has no tags. The designer must define a collection of tags that are useful in intended area. So what is your area? That is very important. If your field of work deals with medical informations, medical terminologies, then you have to create your own set of tags that describes the meaning of those informations. Likewise, if it's related to music, then you have to create your own set of tags that is understandable to that tags. So another advantage is that XML document can be processed by that is parsed by XML parser, wherein which is not possible in the case of HTML. Hypertext markup language does not have any parser software. Whereas for XML we can have our own type of parser such that whether it follows the strict rules specified by W3C. Syntax of HTML are very simple. It can be sort of two distinct levels. One is general low level syntax of XML, syntax of XML which imposes its rule on all other documents. Another one is here is document type definitions or XML schema. So general low level syntax is that's understood that we are following it, and if you are creating our own rules, then it should be mentioned in document type definition, that is DTDs or XML schemas. Here these two files specify the set of tags and attributes. So that means we can create our own syntax, but if you want to attain a uniform level of tag usage, that tag must be defined, its meaning should be specified, and also constraints must be specified. So either DTD or XML schema can be used to define XML based markup language. So in XML you can create our own XML language or markup language, and the rules of those language are specified in DTD or XML schema. So XML declaration. So here the general format, how the XML should be there. Here is XML declaration identifies the document and provides version number of the XML standard used, and also optionally the encoding method, and XML declaration appears as the first line. So this is the declaration, it must appear as the first line of the document. Comments is exactly same as that in the HTML, and we are using XML names, which is used to name the elements and attributes, and we are already familiar with the variable name rules. Similar one is also used here. Is here XML name must begin with the letter or underscore and can include digits, hyphens and periods, but no other special characters or white space characters. Very important point here is you should remember that XML names are case sensitive. If we declare body in these three types, then these are all distinct names. Whereas in HTML, which is case insensitive, all these elements are considered as same element. Let's go for a small example. Okay, or not it complete. See, this is the single root element. Every XML document defines a single root element, while opening tag appears the first line of the XML code. All other elements must be nested inside the nested element. And root element name is the name that you have chosen, and XML tags, just like in XHTML, are surrounded by angle brackets. Every document element must have a closing tag. Every XML element must have one closing tag, and if the element does not contains any information, that is does not include any content, it must have closing element like this, closing like here. And XML tags can have attributes which are provided similar to name and value assignments. As with the XML, XHTML or HTML, all attributes must be enclosed by either single or double quotation. Example, observe here, this is the example file. The first line specifies the version of the XML version and encoding, that is UTF-8, and in this AD is the root element of the XML document. These are all the XML element or XML names, year, make, model, and these encloses some information. For example, here closing tag is here and it encloses some information 1960. So likewise here is in the make, and this is the content, and the element name here is specified like this. This is the opening bracket, opening tag, and this is closing tag. And An element can have sub elements or sub tags. Here location has two sub elements, that is city and state, and after the sub elements the enclosing tag must have a proper closing tag, and this is the end of the root element. So this is the XML structure. It contains some informations. Observe that in this inform file there is no details about the layout of information or how the data should be displayed. So this is only to describe the data. That means using this information an application can process the data. It's not an HTML file or it's not a presenting information. So this is very important point. HTML is used for presenting the data, whereas XML is used for describing the data. So here is some example for XML tags and their attributes. Observe that this is the comment, same as in the HTML, and patient is the XML element or row element here is, and it has an attribute here is name and value. So this is the name and its value. I can write this attribute as an element, that is sub element, like here. See here name, I will use name as the sub element or child element, and the enclosed value is like this. Observe that when I specify as an attribute name attribute, the string textual data is enclosed by double quotes, whereas here if I write as an tags, then I don't need to use double quotes here. And the last one here is the same element can be again splitted into furthermore child elements of name. Here Rajesh, Naresh and Pandit. Here is first indicate that it's the first name, and this is the middle name and last name. So once again I'll go back to the first one. So here is same data is provided in three different ways. This is the simplest one, where attribute and values are used. Here attribute values is used as the internal data in the second example, and in the third example same are splitted into furthermore individual words, that is first, mid and last. So in the previous there is no child elements, but the patient element providing the same information. In the second example, the attribute values are inserted as a child element, and this provides the information. And in the third example, which is the most useful one, and actually this type of XML data is highly recommended, because in this case I will get the information in three different pieces. So the processing of information will be much easier at the application side. An XML document can utilize two auxiliary files. One here is schema file, for example DTD or an XML schema. Schema file which defines the tag set and structural syntactic rules. Another one is style sheet. So style sheet usually it's optional part, and it provides some information how it is to be printed or displayed. Style sheet you already practice style sheet in the HTML experiment, that is CSS. Same CSS logic also utilized in XML also. If you want to display the XML as it is, and if you want to get the printout with some formatting, then you can apply style rule for the XML file. Whereas in the case of HTML, where you specifying the style rule for the HTML tags, whereas in XML, we will apply the style rule for the XML element names that we have defined. An XML document can consist of one or more entities. So ranging size from single character to a chapter of book. So if you are specifying the or providing the information at a large scale, then instead of giving it as a single file, you can split into different entities or different files. In that entities may be of different type, and one of the entities is known as document entities, that is we are dealing with directly, which represents the document. And the reasons for breaking a document into multiple documents is that it is very easier to develop it and it is more manageable. And along with that, some information cannot be represented as textual data, for example images. So the information that cannot be displayed as a textual data, such type of information are known as binary data, and any entities which specifies such type of entity, that is binary data, that is called here is binary entities. Whenever the XML processor or processor encounters name of a non-binary entity in a document, it places its name with value it references. That means we cannot insert the image directly with the XML file. So we will provide one reference. So that reference is provided the information about the binary entities. Whenever the binary entities are encountered by XML, it provides to the corresponding application to deal with those information. For example, if it is related to image, then the display the image is hand over to browser, because browsers are able to display the images in its window. So the most important point, XML parsers or XML processors deal only with text. Document type definitions is a oldest method which is not used nowadays. It is already obsoleted by W3 organizations, but it is better to understand why document type definition is used in the earlier days. It provides structural rules called as declarations. DTD provides structural rules and set of elements and attributes that can appear in a document, as well as how it is elements are related to one another. So elements and attribute may appear. That means we are declaring the elements and also their attributes. And also it has the support for entity definitions. And one more thing, if you are specifying or storing the information for your own personal use, you need not to utilize or create your own document type definition. But if you are creating the XML data for large scale, and if you want to share it with others, and also if you want to others has to follow the same syntactic rules, then you must use DTD, or also nowadays it is XML schema. Unless you are not sharing with the other peoples, and if you are not sharing this with the other softwares, then DTD or XML schema are not required. A DTD can be embedded within the XML document, and in such type of DTD is known as internal DTD. or we can store the DTD declarations in a separate file that will be linked with our XML file. In such case, that will be called as external DTD. External DTD is the most recommended one because using one external DTD, many XML documents can be developed. So it's the same case of the external CSS file of the HTML. Now I'll go for how the elements are declared in a DTD file. So in general format, it is like this: angle bracket, question mark, then the keyword, then other related information. The four possible keywords here are element, attribute list, that is ETT list, entity, and notation. Go for one example.